What if everything you've been told about aging, brain fog, and normal memory decline after a certain age is only half the story? And what if the solution isn't locked inside expensive supplements, complicated treatments, or monthly routines that drain your wallet, but instead sitting quietly in your kitchen right now, overlooked every single day at the grocery store? Tonight's message challenges the way you think about food, health, and what your body is still capable of, even after 60, because according to growing research in nutrition and brain science, the choices you make on your plate don't just affect your energy or weight, they directly influence how clearly you think, how strongly blood moves through your body, and how well your brain continues to function in the years ahead. We are not talking about vague wellness claims here. We are talking about measurable changes in blood flow to the brain, improvements in memory performance, and in some studies, differences that researchers compared to more than a decade of cognitive aging. Before we go into anything specific, there is something important to understand. The human brain does not simply wear out on a fixed schedule. Yes, aging brings changes, but how fast those changes happen is deeply influenced by lifestyle, especially diet. In fact, some long term studies tracking older adults for years have found that people who consistently eat certain types of vegetables experience significantly slower cognitive decline compared to those who rarely include them. In one major research project conducted at a well known medical center, participants who regularly consumed leafy greens showed brain function patterns that looked, on average, over a decade younger than those who did not. That is not a small difference, it is a measurable shift in how the brain ages over time. Now, with that in mind, let's begin counting down three specific vegetables that scientists have studied closely for their effects on circulation, inflammation, and brain health. These are not rare superfoods. They are not exotic imports. They are everyday vegetables that most people ignore or underestimate. And starting at number three, we begin with something that often surprises people when they learn what it actually does inside the body. The third vegetable is beetroot, not powders, not bottle juice blends filled with additives, but the real whole vegetable itself. Many people overlook it, but inside the beet is a natural compound system that directly affects how blood moves through your body. Beets contain high levels of dietary nitrates, which are not harmful in their plant form. In fact, they serve as raw material for a critical molecule in the human body called nitric oxide. This molecule plays a key role in relaxing and widening blood vessels, which allows blood to flow more freely and efficiently. To understand it simply, think of your blood vessels like flexible tubes. Over time and with age, those tubes can become tighter and less responsive. Nitric oxide helps restore their flexibility so blood can circulate more effectively, including the blood that reaches your brain. This improved circulation is not just theoretical. Controlled clinical research has shown that older adults who consume nitrate rich beet products experience increased blood flow to key areas of the brain responsible for decision making, focus, and memory. In some cases, these changes have been observed within just a few hours of consumption. That means the effect is not only long term, but also immediately active in the short term. As blood flow improves, oxygen delivery improves as well. And that combination is closely linked to clearer thinking and reduced mental fatigue. What makes this even more important after the age of 60 is that the body's natural production of nitric oxide begins to decline. The cells that line blood vessels gradually lose efficiency, and as a result, circulation becomes less responsive than it once was. This is one of the underlying reasons many older adults report symptoms like afternoon mental slowdown, mild confusion in familiar environments, or that feeling of mental fog that seems to come and go without warning. Beets essentially help refill that gap by providing the raw materials the body struggles to produce on its own. However, how you prepare beets completely changes their effectiveness. Many people unknowingly destroy much of their benefit through common cooking methods. For example, boiling beets and discarding the water removes a large portion of the beneficial compounds because they dissolve into the liquid. A better approach is slow roasting with the skin left on, which helps preserve both the nitrate content and other protective plant pigments. Another option is consuming them raw, finely grated into salads, where their natural compounds remain fully intact. Timing also plays a surprising role. Some research and clinical observations suggest that consuming beets in the evening may be especially effective because the body's circulation and repair processes become more active during sleep. In that state, the conversion of nitrates into nitric oxide continues, potentially supporting overnight vascular recovery and improving how refreshed the brain feels the next morning. Some individuals who have adopted this routine consistently report waking up with noticeably clearer thinking after a few weeks of regular use. There is also an important nutritional pairing that enhances their effect. When beets are consumed alongside healthy fats, such as olive oil or nuts, the absorption of certain antioxidant compounds improves significantly. These fat soluble nutrients work more efficiently in the presence of dietary fat, allowing the body to use them more effectively rather than simply passing them through the system. At this point, it becomes clear that beetroot is not just a simple vegetable, it is part of a broader biological system that directly interacts with circulation, oxygen delivery, and brain performance. And while it is powerful on its own, it is only the beginning of this countdown because the next vegetable on the list does something even more targeted. It doesn't just improve blood flow, it directly influences how brain cells protect themselves, repair damage, and maintain communication over time. That brings us to number two, and a completely different layer of brain health that most people have never considered. Now we move to the second vegetable in this countdown. And this is where things become even more interesting because we are no longer just talking about blood flow or circulation. We are now talking about what actually happens inside the brain itself at the level of cells, signaling, and long term protection. If beetroot was about improving the delivery system, then this next vegetable is about protecting the system it delivers to. The second vegetable is broccoli, but not in the simple way most people think about it. This is not about general nutrition or basic vitamins. What makes broccoli scientifically important is a specific natural compound inside it that has been studied for decades by researchers looking at aging, inflammation, and neurological decline. That compound is known as sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is not a vitamin or a mineral. It is a biologically active plant compound that has a unique effect on how human cells behave. Inside every cell in the body, there is a kind of built in control system that regulates defense and repair. One of the most important parts of that system is something called the NRF2 pathway. You can think of NRF2 as a master control switch. When it is activated, the cell begins turning on its internal defense mechanisms, producing protective enzymes that help neutralize harmful oxidative stress and support detoxification processes. What makes sulforaphane special is that it is one of the few natural compounds known to activate this system in a meaningful way through diet. Instead of supplying antioxidants from the outside, it encourages your body to produce its own internal defense molecules. That distinction is critical, especially in the context of aging, because the body's natural ability to manage oxidative stress tends to weaken over time. As that balance shifts, inflammation can build up. And in the brain, that inflammation is strongly linked to cognitive decline and memory issues. Researchers studying aging populations have observed that chronic low grade inflammation in the brain, sometimes referred to as neuroinflammation, plays a major role in conditions associated with memory loss and reduced cognitive performance. When inflammatory markers remain elevated over long periods, they can interfere with how brain cells communicate with each other. That interference gradually affects learning speed, memory retention, and mental clarity. This is where broccoli becomes scientifically significant. In multiple studies, compounds found in broccoli have been associated with reductions in inflammatory markers and improvements in cognitive performance tasks such as memory, recall, and processing speed. These are not abstract findings, they reflect measurable changes in how the brain functions under controlled testing conditions. However, there is a major detail that most people completely miss, and it determines whether broccoli is highly beneficial or only moderately useful. The active compound sulforaphane does not actually exist in broccoli in its final form. Instead, broccoli contains two separate components that must combine to create it. One is glucoraphanin, and the other is an enzyme called myrosinase. When the broccoli is chopped or chewed, these components meet and react, producing sulforaphane. The problem is that heat can disrupt this process. If broccoli is cooked too quickly or at too high a temperature, the myrosinase enzyme becomes inactive. When that happens, the natural chemical reaction that produces sulforaphane is greatly reduced. This is why many people unknowingly consume broccoli that is nutritionally far less powerful than it could be. To solve this, researchers and nutrition experts have identified a simple preparation method that preserves much more of its active compounds. After cutting broccoli into small pieces, it is left to rest for a short period of time before cooking. During this waiting period, the enzymatic reaction begins naturally at room temperature, allowing sulforaphane formation to start before heat is even applied. After that, only light steaming is used for a very short duration, just enough to soften the vegetable slightly while preserving its beneficial compounds. This small change in preparation makes a surprisingly large difference. In laboratory testing, broccoli prepared using this method has shown significantly higher levels of sulforaphane compared to broccoli that is cooked immediately after cutting. In simple terms, the same vegetable can have dramatically different biological effects depending entirely on how it is handled in the kitchen. Another important point is consistency rather than quantity. Research suggests that regular intake over time is more important than occasional large servings. The protective effects appear to build gradually, influencing how cells manage stress and inflammation over longer periods. This is especially relevant for brain health, where changes do not happen overnight but accumulate slowly over years. There is also a younger, more concentrated form of broccoli that is worth mentioning here: broccoli sprouts. These contain significantly higher levels of the precursor compounds that produce sulforaphane, making them an even more concentrated source of this protective mechanism. For individuals who may struggle with appetite or volume of food, especially in older age, sprouts provide a practical alternative in smaller portions. Another interesting enhancement comes from combining broccoli with certain condiments like mustard. Mustard contains natural enzymes that can support the same chemical reaction that produces sulforaphane, especially when cooking methods reduce the vegetable's own enzyme activity. This means that a simple addition to a meal can influence how much of the active compound the body ultimately receives. When we look at broccoli in this way, it is no longer just a vegetable on a dinner plate. It becomes a biological tool that influences inflammation control, cellular defense, and long term brain resilience. And while it works deeply at the cellular level, there's still one final vegetable that brings everything together at a higher level of brain structure: memory and long term cognitive performance. That final vegetable is even more common, even more affordable, and yet its impact on the aging brain may be the most significant of all. Now we arrive at the final and most important part of this countdown, and this is where everything comes together. Because while the previous vegetables focused on circulation and cellular protection, this last one goes even deeper. It supports the actual structure of the brain itself, the networks that control memory, learning, focus, and long term cognitive performance. And what makes it even more surprising is how common it is, how affordable it is, and how often it is completely underestimated. The number one vegetable is spinach, not supplements, not extracts, not powdered versions mixed into expensive health drinks, but real whole leaf spinach. What makes spinach so powerful is not a single compound, but a combination of nutrients that work together in a highly coordinated way to support brain health, blood vessel function, and neural communication. One of the most important nutrients in spinach is vitamin K1. This nutrient plays a key role in supporting the integrity of the nervous system, particularly through its involvement in maintaining the protective coating around nerve fibers. These coatings, often compared to insulation around electrical wires, are essential for fast and efficient communication between brain cells. As people age, this insulation naturally becomes less efficient, which can slow down signal transmission and contribute to cognitive slowing. Higher intake of vitamin K has been associated in research with better processing speed and improved memory performance in older adults. Another key component in spinach is folate, the natural form of folic acid. Folate is essential for several biochemical processes in the brain, particularly those involved in neurotransmitter production. These are the chemical messengers that regulate mood, memory, and cognitive clarity. Folate also helps regulate levels of homocysteine, a compound that, when elevated, has been linked to damage in blood vessels and an increased risk of cognitive decline. Studies have found that higher homocysteine levels are associated with a significantly greater risk of memory related disorders, making its regulation an important part of long term brain health. Spinach also contains lutein, a carotenoid that has traditionally been associated with eye health, but more recent research has revealed something far more interesting. Lutein is selectively absorbed and stored in key areas of the brain involved in memory and learning, including regions responsible for attention and decision making. Higher levels of lutein in the brain have been correlated with better cognitive performance in older adults, suggesting that it plays a direct role in maintaining mental sharpness over time. However, just like with the previous vegetables, absorption is just as important as content. Spinach contains fat soluble nutrients, which means they are absorbed much more effectively when consumed with dietary fats. Without fat, a significant portion of these nutrients may pass through the digestive system without being fully utilized. But when combined with healthy fats like olive oil or nuts, absorption can increase dramatically, allowing the body to make far better use of its nutritional content. Preparation also plays a major role here. Light cooking, such as briefly wilting spinach in a pan with olive oil, can actually enhance nutrient availability while preserving its delicate compounds. Overcooking, however, can degrade some of its most valuable nutrients, especially folate. The goal is not to cook it heavily, but to soften it just enough to improve digestibility while maintaining its vibrant green quality. There is also an important synergy between spinach and garlic. Fresh garlic contains compounds that, when chopped and allowed to rest briefly before cooking, become biologically active. These compounds have been associated with improved blood circulation, particularly in small blood vessels, which help support oxygen delivery throughout brain tissue. When combined with spinach, this pairing supports both nutrient delivery and vascular function at the same time, creating a complementary effect on brain health. What makes spinach especially powerful is not just its nutrient profile, but its consistency of effect over time. Studies tracking dietary habits over several years have found that individuals who regularly consume leafy green vegetables experience significantly slower cognitive decline compared to those who rarely include them in their diet. In some long term studies, the difference in cognitive aging has been estimated to be over a decade, meaning that regular intake of these foods is associated with maintaining sharper mental function much later in life. But beyond the science and numbers, there is something more practical to understand. The brain does not respond to sudden changes alone. It responds to consistent input over time. Small, repeated dietary choices build up gradually, shaping how well the brain functions in subtle but meaningful ways. That means these vegetables are not quick fixes. They are long term tools that support the body's natural ability to maintain itself. And perhaps the most important message in all of this is that cognitive decline is not something that simply happens without influence. While aging is natural, how quickly or slowly the brain changes is strongly affected by lifestyle, especially diet. The idea that decline is completely inevitable is not fully supported by modern research. Instead, evidence increasingly shows that the brain retains a remarkable ability to adapt, repair, and remain active well into later life when given the right support. This is where everything connects. Beets support circulation and oxygen delivery. Broccoli supports cellular defense and inflammation control. Spinach supports structure, communication, and long term brain resilience. Each one works in a different way, but together they form a pattern that directly supports cognitive health from multiple angles. The most important takeaway is simple. These are not rare medical breakthroughs or experimental treatments. They are everyday foods available in almost every grocery store, often costing only a few dollars, yet the impact they can have on brain health, energy, and clarity over time is backed by growing scientific evidence and long term observational studies. Ultimately, what this all comes down to is choice. Not a dramatic transformation, not an extreme diet, but small, consistent decisions repeated over time. Because the science suggests that those decisions accumulate in ways that can meaningfully shape how the brain ages. And the earlier you begin, the more time your brain has to respond.